Conversations with the Carters 2016.
Thank you, everybody. Well, it's good to be with you all tonight. I guess I haven't heard any questions yet, but maybe and I have two or three things to say. First, what we've been doing lately. Earlier, late in August, we went to Memphis and built houses for Habitat for a week. My son Chip and his wife were with us. The news reporters told me that the heat index got to 109 degrees while we were still trying to build houses outdoors. So we enjoyed the evenings. And also got a lot done during the daytime. And then I had my 3 months MRI scan this morning. It turned out to be okay. They can still see the scars on the brain, but they're small and they're not even bigger, so that's good. And then this past week I was in San Francisco meeting with some people who might be of help to the Carter Center. We could help them as well. One of them is Laureen Powell, who is the heir of Steve Jobs. So she owns a considerable portion of wife and heir, yes, with her. And she owns a considerable portion of Apple Company. And then went to see Jeff Skoll, who started eBay. And he has a very nice foundation that already works with us. And then I had supper with Mr. Zuckerberg and his wife, Mark Zuckerberg, and his wife, who is a very beautiful Chinese lady. They have an 8-month-old child named Maxima, a little girl. So I enjoyed being with them. He started Facebook, yes, and he had just passed 1.8 billion members of Facebook who had pages. So they're doing quite well. The only limitation, he said, is in fact that they don't have satellite coverage on some parts of the world. And as you may know, the space vehicle that blew up last week had one of his vehicles on it that was going to provide coverage of a part of Africa. But anyway, these people are very wonderful, helpful to the Carter Center. And it wasn't an accident that I went out to see them all in one afternoon. Most of them have pledged to give away to charity 99% of all they own, which in the case of somebody like Steve Jobs would only leave about $500 million a year to live on. So you can see they're very nice people. And that's one of the characteristics of our country that makes me especially proud. No other country on the world has as much of a commitment to having very wealthy people give to foundations large amounts of money. Bill Gates was the one who set the goal for that. And while I was out there, we got a notice that the Gates Foundation had pledged another $15 million to our Getty Worm program. So these are very Speaking of Mark Zuckerberg, he was very interested in our program in Syria. We have at the Carter Center, I'd say, the most active and maybe the most helpful non-governmental organization dealing with the Syrian problem that's now been going on for almost 5 years. As you may or may not know, we've developed a system using Facebook to a great degree, but also Twitter and other social media, transmissions out of Syria to pinpoint the location of the senders. And if you own Facebook or Twitter or sending blogs, of course, the one thing you want to do is to identify yourself, unless it's encrypted or something like that. So the Carter Center takes those transmissions out of Syria, and by very complicated means, working with other people, we can identify where that particular person is located in Syria. So that gives us a chance, an opportunity, with about 100 a day of transmissions to pinpoint where the different factions are located in Syria. So we are the only ones that provide that mapping service to the United States government and to the United Nations and to the Russians and to Economist Magazine and New York Times to show them constantly updated a map of where the different factions are in Syria. So if around Aleppo, one of the factions gives up or yields, and another one takes over, we know very quickly this is something that's not very well known, but the New York Times and Economist always gives us credit when they do publish a map. Sure. Yeah, Google helps us a lot, and a company named Palantir helps us as well. We don't have the capability of analyzing constantly all of those social messages that come in, so we have a lot of help to do that. And Google helped us at the beginning to pinpoint exactly where in Syria each transmission comes from. It's a very interesting process, and I met with a young man who was an intern here a few years ago who developed this system. His name is McNamara, and I met with him this afternoon at his staff. So that's one of the things that we're working on in Syria.
And he was an intern.
That's
He
right.
came to Carter Center.
That's good. He was still an intern. And we also try to help with the ceasefire process. The Carter Center has constantly been dealing for the last 5 years with the Syrian government, with the Bashar al-Assad and his government, as well as the main opponents, to try to work out some transitional deals whereby perhaps for, say, an 18-month period, the leadership role of Assad will fade away and so forth. But that still is up in the air. But we try to promote the ceasefire process. And I just looked at the NewsHour on public broadcasting a few minutes ago, and they said the ceasefire was holding almost completely in the area that is set. So that's good news for the present time. I've also just prepared an op-ed piece for the New York Times. I don't know if they'll publish it or not. Just pointing out how stopping the killing had to be the first process. And stopping the killing will be helpful to the government forces and also to the opposition forces, and maybe as a prelude to their dealing with the problem in the long term. So that's just one of the things we're doing concerning peace. Another one that comes to mind is in Colombia. As you may know, Colombia has been plagued with a war with the opposition group named FARC for more than 50 years now. And the Carter Center has been deeply involved in the process of negotiating a peace agreement. I'm not trying to take credit for it, we just happened to be asked to do so. But almost all of the negotiations have been taking place in Havana, Cuba. And we've been helping them, and so has the government of Norway and others. So they signed an agreement last month, as a matter of fact, between FARC and the government of Colombia, and they'll have a referendum, I think the 2nd of October, to see if the people of Colombia will accept the deal that's been worked out, largely granting some role for the rebels in the future processes, political processes, and social processes of Colombia. You can see how difficult that will be for some of the people in Colombia to accept, because a lot of deaths have occurred and people have been kidnapped and so forth, and they've had charge of a drug operation in Colombia, and to forgive them and work out a deal so there might be progressive citizens in the future is not easy to maintain. We've also had a very active role in election processes the last few months. Jason Carter, my grandson and the chairman of our board of trustees, was in charge of a group that went over to Myanmar, formerly Burma, and it was a very successful election. The Constitution still needs some changes to be made, but Aung San Suu Kyi is now the new political leader of former Burma, or I'll say Myanmar, and she's trying to work out some improvements in the country over a long period of time. The Carter Center has always had, for the last 2 or 3 years, and still will maintain, a full-time office in Yangon, in Myanmar. I've been there 3 times trying to work this out in advance, but we're still very interested in that. And Marianne Peters, who introduced me, was stationed once in Burma when that was its name. So the Carter Center is deeply involved in that possible future progress toward freedom and democracy and more justifiable claim for human rights. We've also done elections recently in the Philippines. That was in May. I was watching the same news program just a while ago, and the president of the Philippines, Duterte, who's quite a controversial figure. I know it might be shocking to Americans to hear the prospect of a controversial figure being as a Democrat, I hope it didn't happen, but anyway, I notice a wave of laughter when I say controversial figure, but he just called on all the American troops to leave the Philippines, and they've been there for a long time. They were pretty active in the Philippines when I was president, and since then, but he just called on them to leave because of some altercations with the Muslim community in the Philippines, and he claims that they are precipitating violence among the Muslims against other Filipinos because American troops are there. So he said it doesn't help for the Muslim citizens of the Philippines, who make up a great number of them, to be seeing Americans, troops, and uniforms everywhere. So we stay, you can see, when I read the New York Times, Washington Post, and other news media every day, I can always see how the Carter Center's fingers are directly at least involved in some of the historically important events. I had a visit recently from the head of the Organization of American States, who came down the plains to visit me in my home. And we have a group called Friends of the Charter, of the Democratic Charter in Latin America. And so the Carter Center tries to work with former prime ministers and presidents in the Latin American area on some of the current problems. So he came down to ask me and the Carter Center over a period of time to help with several problem areas. I'll just mention three of them. One is Haiti, which has an election coming up in October. They've had a disaster in political life, as well as you know, hurricanes, and then the horrible earthquake we had 2-3 years ago. And we are hoping that they'll have an honest and fair election in October. Venezuela, which is kind of a basket case as far as economics is concerned, and also the political situation there. And the Carter Center has helped to conduct 4 elections in the Philippines in the past. We've offered to help them with the upcoming possible elections for municipal offices and that sort of thing, but they have not approved having any foreign observers come in to help them. And the other countries, Nicaragua, in which we've also had 4 elections that were very important to us. We were the main observers in those 4 elections. The first 3 elections, the Sandinistas lost, and the last 4th election we held, the Sandinistas won. And since then, they've established pretty much not a democracy, but a way to perpetuate themselves in office. And so we offered to help with the upcoming election in Nicaragua, and then they announced, Daniel Ortega, the president, announced that they did not want any foreigners observing elections in Nicaragua. That's the same policy we have in the United States. I'm not kidding. When we tried to bring in a few observers, say from China, to look at American elections or from other places, we have a very difficult time getting permission for them to visit any polling place. We have to find just 1 or 2 states in America that will let foreigners go in and see what the election is taking place. So that's not an uncommon thing to have. We're also exploring the possibility of helping with the election in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I doubt if that's going to take place. We don't know yet about that. It depends on whether the president tries to have what I consider to be an illegal opportunity for re-election. His term is expired, and it would be unconstitutional, in my opinion, for him to run. If he does, my inclination is not to participate, but I'm not the sole boss of the Carter Center. We'll still have to make that decision. But for a long time, we have seen that the Congo, and as well as countries like Guyana in South Africa, have their great natural resources stolen from them. The wealth of diamond mines and coal mines and oil and so forth, and timber from the woodlands, which is very valuable. They have a corrupt government, and then the Minister of Mining or the Minister of Forestry will make a deal with a foreigner, say for $50,000 bribe, and then they come in and take millions, hundreds of millions of products out of the country without paying for it. And so the Carter Center is trying to help them now for 10 or 15 years to make public those contracts with foreign countries who are going into to Congo, for instance, to extract their minerals without adequate payment to the people. Concerning human rights, we've had very active last year. As you may know, about the last 3 or 4 years, our top priority has been to deal with the worst human rights violations on earth, in my opinion, and that is the abuse of women and girls. Not only in foreign countries, but also in this country. I won't go into any detail about that. But we've had very good success in dealing with the Muslim community in some countries, including the leadership of the Muslim community, even in countries like Egypt. And so they have helped us with that. We have had a program back in the fall in Ghana where people from Senegal and Ghana and other places in West Africa have come together to work with the Carter Center on how to do away with some of the abuse of women and girls. We have, we'll continue with that, of course. This June, just a few months ago, we changed the subject this time just on a general end to violence. Violence it's hard to quantify the degree of violence, but the commitment of the world to use violence to solve problems has increased dramatically since 9/11, as well as the use of firearms in our country and maybe some renovation of racial prejudice, and we've had a financial crash, and our country has pretty well abandoned its formal commitment to human rights. I wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times not too long ago. It showed that out of the 30 paragraphs in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United States was violating 10 of the 30 paragraphs. And a lot of that is, I think, an overt reaction to terrorism. And in that process, we've learned to distrust our neighbors much worse than we ever have before, certainly in my lifetime. And so we've had a lot of adverse consequences. And of course, the United States has been in the longest war that we've ever fought in history as a result, indirectly or directly, of 9/11. So we tried to deal with the consequences of any violence. One of the things that we decided was to try to prevent the United States from spending $1 trillion, which, as you know, is $1,000 billion, or $1,000,000, whichever way you want to say. It's a lot of money. Just on upgrading our nuclear arsenal. And that's a decision that's now being made, and we came out publicly and sent a delegation to Washington to spread the word that we, with the Carter Center and others, many others, are against the United States devoting that much money just to upgrade our nuclear arsenal. If they do, of course, the Russians and others who have nuclear weapons will have to upgrade there, so the United States can take a position on that, as the Carter Center has done to start with. Let's shift now to healthcare, and I'm not going to go into detail. We have 11 cases of guinea worm so far this year. We've been disappointed in finding in the last 2 or 3 years that guinea worm is transmitted through dogs. And in particular in the country of Chad, we have seen that where we thought we had completely eliminated guinea worm from Chad for about 10 years, it has come back, and we now have a few cases, 6 or 7 cases in human beings, but several hundred cases in dogs. And what happens is that this particular river goes up and then goes down in the dry season and leaves lakes where the water goes down, and in those lakes the guinea worm eggs breed, and the people catch multiple fish out of that. It's one of our biggest harvest commitments. And when they clean the fish, they throw the entrails on the ground. The dogs eat the entrails, and they contract guinea worm, which is later has potential of going back into human beings. So we're having to deal with that on a different basis. We're making progress on it, and we'll keep you informed about it in the future, but it's a fairly recent development. Another thing that we do is to treat people for blindness. We have 2 major diseases. One is trachoma, and the other is onchocerciasis, or river blindness. And I won't go into diseases, and the population of the United States now is 324 million. So this is 60 million people more treated by the Carter Center just to prevent blindness than the total population of the United States. It's hard to imagine how many that is, but I think about it a lot, and I thought you might be casually interested. So that, by the way, we have a crash program in some countries like Ethiopia to do these treatments, and we have trained more than 30,000 people in Ethiopia to be health workers, either registered nurses or physician assistants or licensed practical nurses who are able to be midwives and so forth. And when we go in and have a crash program for 1 week or 5 days to treat people, this last time when Mary Ann had a chance to be there for the first time, in 5 days we treated 9.3 million people. But it's with the help of more than 30,000 people that we have trained in the past to help the folks of Ethiopia. And now I'll turn the program over to the real boss of the Carter Center.